Hey guys, how's it going? Uh, so I just finished the John Schleinich Memorial, and that was this weekend, and it was a decent event for me. I only lost two rating points, so I went from 1793 to 1791. That's a good result because I only scored 1.5 out of 5. So, if you have a one win, one draw to 5 games, and you only lose two rating points, that's good in my books. Yeah, I was able to beat the highest rated player at the event, or second highest rated. Rex is 2033 and Emil is 2012. Yes, I was able to beat the highest rated player, and actually no one else was able to beat Rex, so that makes me feel good. But on the other hand, I lost to everyone else except Roy, who I drew. So I need to improve in some areas of my game. So I'm gonna go over like the least exciting games first, and then I'm gonna pivot to the more exciting games because they're way more interesting. So the first one is me against Yash, and Yash is from Edmonton, and we have a one rating point difference at this event, so we're probably close to equal in skill. But this game he demonstrated superior understanding of the opening and the middle game position. Uh, so he gave me something to study. So for example, it was a Carol Con main line, Tartakower variation. Yeah, maybe you're more likely to equalize cleanly with Bishop f5, maybe even knight d7. Knight d7 might be less clearly equal, but more drawish. Knight f6 is the most dynamic option and the least drawish. So, yeah, it's good, and that's why it's fashionable right now. And, okay, this is what everyone plays, and he plays the main line, and that's what everyone plays. So, if they play the main line, you should expect a Tartakower, and, well, if you play the Tartakower, you should expect c3, bishop d6, bishop d3, castles, knight e2. Knight f3 doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, even though it's what you run into quite often. It's not necessarily because of the pin. So, like, for example, you might see knight f3, just rook e8 followed by knight d7. And if they're scared of the pin, they might play h3, or eventually you might pin with bishop g4. And, well, after bishop g4, they might release the pin with h3, and you might want to set up this kind of battery with a bishop on e6 and a queen on d7, and try to play for some sacrifice on the h3 weakness once they castle kingside. But they can also castle queenside, so this move isn't necessarily that bad for the bishop g4 pin reasons. It's more so that the knight has very little scope in view of the f6 pawn. But in light of this, the knight still has potential to come to f5, so it's not all bad. But knight e2 should be more critical, especially because if white plays queen c2 first, black can force knight e2 with rook e8. On bishop e3 there's bishop f4, right? So knight e2 is probably the best option here. So, okay, if they can go knight e2 here or knight f3, but if they go queen c2, then you can play rook e8 forcing knight e2. So knight e2 makes a lot of sense, and okay, the knight has a little bit more scope, coordination with the bishop on f4, so that's something for black to worry about. And actually, it was this coordination on the f4 square that led me to make some suboptimal decisions later in the game. So we'll see how that happens. Rook e8, because the knight's probably going to come to f8, although it didn't this game, right? That's the main... okay, the rook's also really good on the open e-file. Queen c2, h5, this is really fashionable. Bishop e3. And here I played bishop e6. It's probably not a bad move. But I was even like close to 6 months ago in the Steins Menchik, I saw Jonathan Wu playing h4, and he always plays this h4 move. And I was always thinking, like, what, I've never seen this move. Why are you playing h4? What purpose is it serving? Etc. And I always, like, kind of criticized it inside my head. And so I didn't play it this game until, like, much, much later when it was kind of, like, forced, but not really, it wasn't really, my position wasn't really lost by that point. But then, because I got wrecked so badly this game, I went and checked my book. Like, what should I play in this position? And it recommends, surprise, h4. So, yeah, now I know h4 is the move here. So, for example, h4, h3, can be expected here. And okay, this you can consider as kind of a main line. I won't go into any of the theory though, because it's something I should study, not like talk about, because I don't know any of it. So I played bishop e6. You know, this might incentivize him to castle queenside. I mean, I don't really have an attack going here, but for example, like, you know, I can't grab the a2 pawn, so castling queenside is safe. And even in the database, it's actually, in the master's database, it's the most common move. So I was thinking there was a good chance he would castle queenside, but he castled kingside, which makes sense. Then played queen c7, h3. So I thought, okay, this is great. Now I want to play queen d7, gang up on the h3 pawn, right? But my thought process was that, well, if I go queen d7, he's going to play knight f4. And I didn't like that he could take my bishop. This sort of like nullifies the idea of queen d7, which is to gang up on the h3 pawn. So I'd have to give up either one of my bishops, especially because he's attacking the h5 pawn. So I could play h4, and then knight takes e6, rook takes e6 would follow. Also, this knight doesn't have a really good home now. Or I could play bishop takes f4, bishop takes f4. But then I've relinquished the f4 square, and the f4 square is really important in this position. Just because it's a square in White's camp that's very very influential. Maybe if he doesn't have a knight, it's not as a big deal, but yeah, the reason, and I mean here it's not as if I'm playing bishop takes h3 anytime soon, so I didn't want to play into this. What I should have played here is probably knight d7, followed by knight f8, and then maybe queen d7 or something like this. But I didn't think about doing... I didn't want to do that because, well, I thought, well, the only reason I really want to play knight f8 is to play knight g6. But there's a bishop battery there already, so I, you know, had to think about what exactly do I want to do here. And so I came up with the idea of knight e6. And, you know, my thought process was sort of that, well, now he can't play c4 because of knight b4. So... yeah, and then I'm probably going to play queen d7, followed by knight c7, and then go to the d5 square with my knight. He played b4, and then my next move is probably a mistake. I should probably commit with queen d7 here. And yeah, I'd have to face knight f4, and it would probably be best to just, you know, say h4 and then let him play knight takes e6. I'd have to play pawn takes e6, I guess, here, because bishop f5 would be a problem. And this structure might be bad, might not. I mean, he would have bishop g6 here, so... yeah, maybe I wouldn't play h4 there. Maybe I'd have to play bishop takes f4. But, you know, I've already expressed why I found this distasteful. I didn't want to do that. I mean, I could play knight c7 in this position, try to follow up with knight d5, but even here there's c4. So... it's likely that the idea to play knight a6 is just dubious, and, you know, I need to study my theory and understand why h4 is a good move. I mean, I have this book by Lars Schandorf, and he probably goes into some detail. So already I think, let me, yeah, I'll put maybe a dubious, maybe an interesting move next to knight a6. I mean, one of the ideas was he also doesn't really want to take, because if queen a4 here, I had... a5 prepared, right? So taking on a6, he can't really abuse the queen side, and I'm even going to be able to use the semi-open b file. And, well, after b4, rook e7, if he takes now on queen a4, I don't have a5, but I have bishop c4, which would be annoying. So he really doesn't want to take that knight, actually. But rook e7 was kind of intending to double on the e file, but maybe the rook wants to come to c8. For example, after a4... I thought, well, I need to have a response to b5 prepared, and I wanted to play knight b4 on b5, so okay, rook came to c8. But my pieces are kind of miscoordinated now. The knight's not going to have a clear path to d5, because I'm not going to play queen d7 in time. So what happened here was rook fb1, queen b8. I wanted to maintain control over the f4 square, but this is like way too, asking way too much of the position, right? I'm asking the Tartakower variation to like bend over backwards for me, and it's just not in the position. So I tried to bend the position to my will, and when you try to do that, bad things happen. So queen d2, knight c7 finally, and c4. Now I'm not playing knight d5, and, well, he has this huge queenside majority, and this is basically White's dream position. All their pieces are perfectly organized. He has full queenside initiative, and, okay, knight e8. Knight can't do anything. c5. I can play bishop c7 and grovel, but, b5 would follow, and my queen's not going to be very happy with no squares to go to. So I play bishop h2 instead, king h1, h4, trade off the piece, and, well, queen a8 here, I'm suffering forever, and so I play knight c7 and proceeded to blunder a piece. I mean, if I don't play bishop d5 here, he's just going to take on c6, and that's really bad because I can't play bc6. I guess the best move here could be queen a8, but even then bc6, this can't be played. I don't see it. So yeah, pretty bad beating by Yash. But no, he played it basically pretty textbook and showed me, now when I go to like a larger tournament, I'll definitely have this line prepared better. The very standard, like this type of setup. I'll have this set up with castles kingside, prepared probably with h4, and I'll have a better idea of what I want to do. So the next game, that was kind of underwhelming as well, is my game against Emil Soborov. He was the second highest rated player in the event, so I wasn't expecting too much here. I'm just going to make this from the black side, because I had the black pieces here. But, I did some prep. So my prep was knight f3, knight f6, g3, b5, the Spassky variation of the King's Indian attack. I went through this line with my coach, actually, about 6 months to a year ago. And, because I had a pretty bad loss to a King's Indian attack rete player, and so this line seemed appealing. I don't know exactly how to respond to knight f3. I guess I'm going to choose based on the player because, for example, knight f6 here, they could play d4. And, well, if I play d5 here, I'm now playing a semi-Tarrasch instead of a Tarrasch. So I guess, one of the things I could do here is maybe play a Benoni with c5, right? c4 would or maybe d5, e6, c4 would transpose to some sort of Benoni. Yeah, maybe c5 is the way to go here if they go d4. I definitely wouldn't want to play d5 because then after c4, e6, knight c3, c5, this is a semi-Tarrasch, and it's not bad. But I don't know the semi-Tarrasch. I only know the pure Tarrasch, which is d4, d5, c4, e6, knight f3 or knight c3, followed by c5 here. So the ones with knight f6 are different, and you need to know specific theory to not get crushed. So I don't know if I'm going to stick to knight f6 as a response to knight f3. I really need to figure something out. I play c5 sometimes as a Sicilian invitation, but from the rete player's perspective, they're probably just going to play g3 and expect to play some sort of Catalan. So psychologically, c5 inviting a Sicilian is unlikely to work, although plausible. I guess in response to g3, I could always play knight f6 here. Yeah. And then, maybe try to play it like a Benoni. I don't know. Anyways, this is more like opening preparation stuff. The main problem that I have against the rete is, well, depending on the setup that I know my opponent wants to go for, I have a specific setup in mind, but I can't choose every setup. I have to commit to one at some point. So, luckily I knew my opponent was going to go g3, and here I go b5. So actually saying I'm going to go c5 against that doesn't, going c5 doesn't really make any sense if I like this position. But okay, bishop g2, bishop e7. This position, I have a decent idea of what I want to do. b4 makes a ton of sense here. a6 is not grabbing the space, so you want to grab the space on the queen side. That's the main idea of b5. Grab queenside space. In exchange, you give up a little bit of central control, but you get to exchange the light squared bishops. You get a lot of stuff that's very pleasant development, and you don't have many problems. So d4, c5. c5 appears to be a good pawn break here. I don't see a reason why it's not. c4. I'm very skeptical of this. I'll leave some annotation in the actual study on whether the engine thinks it's a mistake. But my understanding was that this knight wants to come to c4, and that's a pretty powerful outpost, in view of the fact that d5 might not always be a good way to kick the knight. So that was my understanding, is that he wants a knight on c4, and that if he doesn't put a knight on c4, he's going to have a hard time developing his queenside knight. So I was also expecting like maybe c3 here, and I would like probably reinforce with a5. I don't know. There were lots of moves possible here already. But knight bd2 is what I was mainly expecting. But yeah, I was not anticipating c4. So c4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop takes g2, king takes g2. And the master's database looks really promising here, so I'd be interested to see how the engine evaluates this. I want to look into, in this position, bishop c5, because later on in the game, this knight was really powerful and really hard to deal with. No masters have played it, and I didn't either. But I really wanted to trade my bishop for the knight later on in the game, so maybe that's something to look into. Bishop e7 instead. And he played b3. And b3, at first sight, it made no sense to me, because it's not doing anything, right? Because with b3, I don't want to play b3. So b3 does not... I'm not attacking the c4 pawn, I'm not attacking the a4 pawn. b3 looked like a waste of a move to me. But then I'm like, oh, this guy, Emil, he likes to play with a fianchetto, and I guess because I eliminated his kingside fianchetto, he wants to get a queenside fianchetto going. And I'm like, yeah, it makes enough sense. So once I realized the psychology of my opponent, I'm like, okay, I understand your move. So I played knight a6. Now, all the master games here show that black is castled, so let's follow the main line, and then we'll go back to my idea. So castle's kingside, bishop b2, knight a6 was played once here, queen c7, queen b6. I'd like to investigate knight a6, because it makes sense. Knight d2, knight c5. We may even transpose to my game, although here queen c2 was played. My opponent played f3. We may also look at queen c7 here, f3, a6, preventing knight b5. Yeah, this looks like something similar to my game against Emil. I might look at these master games later on to get a better idea of how I should handle the position, because the way I handled it this game doesn't look like I succeeded in my plans. So I played knight a6 here. The idea is to go knight c5, and there's no real way for him to win the b4 pawn, even if my knight is in the way, because, well, like, there would be discoveries. And the knight would be well placed on c5. I figured, this is my outpost now. So bishop e2, knight c5, and f3. And f3, yeah, never play f3, but, it's okay. He wants to play e4, and that makes sense. I mean, if he didn't play f3 here, I might even consider putting a knight on e4. Maybe it's not going to do anything, but still. Or maybe even consider knight g4. That way, if he plays f3, there's knight e3, so he has to watch it. But f3, queen c7, and e4. Knight b5 doesn't really do anything. For example, if he plays the forcing line knight b5, I was going to play queen c6. And then after knight d4 again, queen b7. And I basically got my knight a queen space away. And I figured, yeah, this makes sense on a long diagonal, so I would have been very happy with that. Yeah, I guess knight d2 is also possible here. Lots of things are possible, but he played e4, I castled, and queen e2 was played. Yeah, and it makes sense if he wants to push e5, that he wants a major piece behind his e-pawn, right? So I played d6. You have to, in this line, make sure that your knight cannot be directly kicked away from an e5 push. That was one of the things that I remembered from my lecture with my coach. So d6 was natural, and knight d2. And yeah, I was sort of like thinking in my head, yeah, so your knight can come to c4, so don't you regret playing pawn c4 here earlier? And I was also thinking, like, okay, maybe he's going to play f4 and bring the knight behind the pawn. And I thought the position was roughly equal here. We'll see if the engine validates that thinking. Rook fd8. This move could be inaccurate. It was unclear to me whether this rook or this rook wanted to be flexibly placed on d8. For example, this rook might want to be placed on b8 to defend the b4 pawn. I didn't see the e-file opening up. Oh, what is this? A challenge? A bullet challenge? Okay. Okay, let's go. I think this is Jonathan Wu. Okay. We're gonna play. We're gonna play some bullet chess here. No, this is Jing. This is Jing Hui, okay. Oh my god, I just studied this line this morning. Holy fuck. Okay, e5. Knight g4. Why is he thinking? Has he not seen this? Also, isn't he supposed to be playing, hold on. This isn't a theory. There is something off about this. Something off indeed. Okay, for some reason he's tanking. I don't know. I don't know what he's thinking about. Maybe he blundered already. I have no clue. Okay, F takes E5. Okay, let's see here. Let's play E6 maybe. Follow it up with knight G5. Come on, Jing. Lamau. Queen B6. Okay, fair enough. Let's play bishop takes D7. No. Queen E2. Exclam. Now, if he take... Okay, so I'm going to play knight takes E6, threatening knight takes G7 check. Am I sacking here? Am I going to sack? No, bishop C4 check looks strong. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not strong. I don't know. I can't castle. Shoot. Okay, I'm going to play rook F1 maybe. Or rook F7. Okay, he stops that. Queen takes E7 wins. Booyah, Jay. Okay, good fun. Okay, B3, D5, bishop G4, takes, E6, knight F6, A6. Let's play this, and castle. And I guess C6, rook E8. Okay, I guess I'm not playing E5. Let's play, I don't know, I have to play something. Rook C8, C5, CD4 next. I'm going to recapture with the knight if he captures. Okay, knight C5. Bam. Okay. So now let's play this move. It attacks a rook. Let's play this move. Pins the bishop. I have no idea what I'm doing. Yeah, this position's highly unclear. Highly. Now I have a double attack on his knight. But I have an this is a very typical isolated queen pawn position, as you probably know. Okay. I don't know what to think. Okay, let's... Okay, that's a good move. That's a pretty good move. Okay, queen c7, what's the problem? I know there's a problem with queen c7, I just want to know what it is. Queen takes... No. I have a knight. Okay, maybe there's no problem. How am I playing faster than this kid? This kid's like in grade 10, so he should be playing faster than me, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just that good. Okay, let's go back here. Oh, I dropped my bishop. I'm so dumb. Okay, let's intermezzo against the queen. That way, I guess I'm not losing my bishop. Gonna play bishop a7. I can't believe I missed that. Okay, bishop b8 here. And, I mean, I'm not even that far down on time. But, okay, let's try to get e5 in. Ooh, he's pinned. But it's not won yet. Okay. Okay, free pawn for him. Okay, let's attack here. I have no idea what to do about this situation. This is rough. Let's go back, I guess. No, that just hangs the rook. Okay, take my rook. Never mind, gotta go. LOL. Okay, sure. Okay. We'll see what happens here. Gotta play something. Gotta play something. I can't flag him. I'm obviously not flagging him here. He's obviously just gonna win. I don't know. There's no stalemate. Okay, I'll just resign. Okay. GG. Okay, so he signs off. So, 2 bullet games with Jing. I'm not going to analyze them because they're bullet games, but hey, you know, I lost 0 rating for losing to him. But the last game I gained 13 ratings, so good bullet chess. What happened here? So c5. c5 should be playable. Bishop b5, bishop d7, e5. He has to play knight g4, e6. Yeah, it's funny. Maybe I maybe I shouldn't have played this against him in a bullet game, because maybe he's going to prepare it next time we meet. However, this is my prep for Jing, should we ever meet in a classical game, because I checked his chess.com, and he has when I checked last, 9 months ago when I was preparing for him, he had 4 games in this position with a 100% lose rate to bishop b5. He lost 100% of those games. So, yeah, bishop d7, e5, and he has no idea how to play this. But I guess, okay, fe5 is wrong here for some reason. But, okay, I got a great position, and I checkmated him. So, it all worked out in the end. Okay, let's go back to the study. So, that was some fun bullet chess. Okay, so I was talking about Emil, I think. So, yeah. What happened here was Queen c7, I talked about some stupid stuff that he's not going to play, and rook fd. It's the wrong rook problem. Okay, so later in the game I had this issue where this rook kind of wanted to be on e8 because, okay, this looks like kind of a Maroczy bind, but you could argue, one could argue that this is a great Maroczy bind for black. You could also argue it's an okay Maroczy bind. You could also argue it's a great Maroczy bind for white. Lots of things are possible here. The main reason it's a Maroczy bind is the c4, e4 structure. But I have a pawn on b4, and that's not very typical in the Maroczy. Additionally, a knight on c5 is very typical in the Maroczy, and it's a very great piece. I have a knight on f6. He's gotten rid of the light squared bishop, which is usually the worst piece in a Maroczy. So you can argue a lot of things here. The d5 break, if it's playable, usually equalizes. And I didn't see the use of a rook on e8 here, but let's just go down a few moves. I played rook fd8, rook a8, and rook f8 are that's probably a better setup, and I'll show you why. Because here, if I play d5, and mind you, d5 is always very hard to play because after c takes d5, e takes d5, there's always e5, right? But for example, if my rook were on e8, potentially I could play bishop d6 there. I'm not going to go into concretely because I suck at doing concrete analysis. Maybe I'll do it right now. So rook fe8. Let's say he plays rook fd1 as he did in the game, and now I can play d5 here perhaps. And he could just play e5 straight away, but now his bishop's kind of bad if he plays f4 as well. The f5 square looks kind of juicy for my knight. Maybe this knight will have to move though. And so knight d7 here is perhaps playable. And if he tries c takes d5, e takes d5, and then here e5, perhaps I could play bishop d6. Point being that I would take his queen with check if he takes there, and I guess here he can move. Well, he can remove his queen. He has to defend the pawn first, and then here I could try knight d7. Okay, so wrong rook problem. Maybe this is my fatal errors. Rook fd8. Maybe my rook wanted to go to e8. Additionally, maybe earlier on in the game when he played knight takes d4, maybe bishop c5 after bishop takes, king takes. Maybe bishop c5 here is interesting. Okay, so he proceeded to take control of the king side and get the key control of the center here. And I think white's better here. This knight is making it so hard for me to do anything. I took it and then played e5, but now after bishop e2, which I of course saw, he has a better position, and I didn't really see any other way to play. Here, however, I could have stayed in the game by preventing him from playing knight f1, knight e3. The knight is protecting the e4 pawn, so if I play knight f6, and he plays knight f1, I can capture the e4 pawn. However, I played knight e6 without any much consideration. I thought, okay, this knight wants to come to c5, and maybe I'll play ef4 with some tactical discovery, but I wasn't being concrete enough. I didn't really know what to calculate, right? This is one of my problems, is if I'm in a position like this that I've never seen before, I don't know what to calculate, and so I try to calculate something, and it doesn't work out. Whereas if it's a position I've seen before, I know exactly what to calculate. I calculate it, and I calculate it well, and then I just destroy my opponents. So this is why I'm a very unbalanced, high variance player. The positions I know how to play, I can play very well, but the positions that I haven't seen before, I play terribly. Sometimes I play them very well as well. It all depends. It's basically up to random chance. So regardless, here with knight f6, I probably could have stayed in the game longer. Maybe he would just defend the e4 pawn with the rook, and then I'd have to give up 2 knights for the e4 pawn. Should he play knight f1 later? But maybe here I would even add more attack. It's unclear. But knight f1, knight f6, and okay, he managed to get a complete bind on the position. There's no real good alternative here. If I go queen b7, he pointed out he could play knight takes f6, and then play rook d5, and that's more than good enough, similar to the game. But also, queen b7 has the flaw that there was another flaw I saw. For example, the only idea here is to capture the e4 pawn, and I didn't want to play this position very much, especially because I guess he's threatening to win my queen with knight f6 here. Okay, rook takes d5, and I basically suffered for the rest of the game. And, you know, I sacrificed a pawn, and, well, he got a pass d pawn, and so, you know, this is resignable already. And so I played on until I blundered a piece because, well, I mean, there's no tricks here. So, yeah, Emil pretty much beat me pretty handily as well, but it's also good because now I can study this game and learn how to play the Spassky variation of the King's Indian attack better as well, right? So this is kind of my process. I play, I fail, I play, I fail, and then eventually I hope I learn. So that brings me to my next game, which is my game against Mike Zegelaar. This was round 1, and I had prepared some Sicilian variations that I thought he might go into, right? They played a Caro-Kann because his coach told him to play the Caro-Kann to get like better at positional chess. Okay, so I play the sharp fantasy line because, you know, playing positionally against Caro-Kann doesn't make a whole lot of sense. He plays the positional line e6, which makes sense, although he's pretty much out of book by this point like most Caro players would be. But e6 is a good practical choice. It tends to give me the most trouble. Knight c3, so, you know, okay, in case you haven't seen this position before, black has a threat to play de4, and on fe4 play queen h4, so knight c3 is a good response. You can try to sack a pawn with bishop e3. Knight c3 should be better. He played knight f6 here, and you can play e5. I don't like to, because you're likely to transpose into a Steinitz French after f4 c5. This is a direct transposition, actually, to a Steinitz French. After knight f3, knight c6, this is just French defense. So I don't want to play that, so I don't know it, so that's why I don't want to play it. So I play the line I know, bishop e3. So I believe at this point there is a pawn sacrifice ready. de4, fe4, and maybe there's a pawn sacrifice here yet. But after bishop e4, now e5 should lead to a great winnower, at least according to Dale Hassel. He was helping me in the post-mortem, and he said, yeah, after knight d7 here, f4, this is a great winnower. Because in the normal winnower, I believe this knight goes to e7, and then I guess it can come to f5 later on. Whereas here, it spent 2 tempi getting to d7, which is a very much worse square. So, yeah. So... I actually had a chessable course by Alex Benzea that went over this line with e5. And I actually went over it earlier in the week and then proceeded to forget it at the tournament. But it's okay because now this kind of position, when I realized that, oh, I had this position against Mike Zegelaar and played the wrong move, now I'll have that memory. So it's a good experience. a3 isn't even a bad move. It may even be the move I prefer, because after bishop takes c3, b takes c3, d takes c4, I can sacrifice a pawn with f takes c4. So, I actually thought he could put me under some pressure here, but the engine, when I checked it, validates this line. So, for example, after knight takes e4, queen g4 is the obvious move, and knight takes c3, you have queen takes g7, so he's obviously not playing that. I thought queen a5 was going to be strong here, but I missed... I missed, I believe, after I think, yeah, I think I missed because okay, queen takes c3 is a threat, right? Um, and I can't quite recall what the analysis was, but for example, if queen takes g7, queen takes c3, king e2, there's queen takes c2, so this can't be good. There's no way this is good. The central idea here is bishop d2, and I believe it could be bishop d2 here already. I guess if knight takes d2, king takes d2 with a playable position, because I've sacrificed a pawn here, but already queen takes g7 is a threat. So perhaps it could castle. I'm not exactly sure how the engine would evaluate this, but I remember bishop d2 being the move that I missed in both variations. It could also be here just queen takes e4, queen takes c3, bishop d2, queen takes a1 with a exchange sacrifice, and then maybe king f2. This seems maybe more playable. But yeah, so the engine gave some line that I can't quite remember, but it said queen g4 is a good move against knight takes e4. So something to investigate for next time. I was kind of worried about queen a5. So what I was thinking during the game, this is probably just as important, is after knight takes e4, queen g4, queen a5, if queen takes e4, queen takes c3 would be strong. But I guess I may have missed bishop d2. I'll briefly turn on the engine just to check. Queen g4, queen a5. Does it want bishop d2 here or bishop d2? It wants knight e2. Okay, so it's knight e2 here. Fair enough. Knight e2 makes sense. So it must have been bishop d2 against just queen a5 directly. So queen a5 here, just bishop d2, and no issues, right? Because I guess knight takes e4. It still wants queen g4. No, not queen g4 here. Or maybe not bishop d2 here. It wants e5. Yes, I mean, okay, it's low depth, but I guess bishop d2 was the move in the secondary pawn sacrifice that I guess I should have been more aware of. But yeah, here already I was uncertain what my response would be to queen a5 and knight takes e4, and to nobody's surprise, I didn't see the top engine lines, and I still don't see them, right? So, for example, queen a5, it wants, I believe, e5 followed by knight e2. There's one knight e2 here? Right, I can't even figure them out, even on my own. Bishop d3 or bishop d2 here. Whereas on knight takes e4, queen g4, queen a5, it wants knight e2 here. So yeah, surprisingly I didn't see knight e2 or any of these e5 ideas. So I played f takes e4, and I was thinking, yeah, I probably have comp here. So the reason I was scared is because I thought after queen a5, the best move would be queen d3, and then he would have the deflection knight takes e4, queen takes e4, queen takes e3, and I thought this would be strong for him, and I think the engine agrees that this is good for him. So I thought that no matter whether he played knight takes e4, and then I play queen g4 here first, right, or like the reverse order, queen a5, then knight takes e4, no matter what, he was going to win my rook on a1. So I think I came to the conclusion that on queen a5, I was just going to go bishop to d3, and then on queen takes c3, king e2, and claim I have the center for a pawn. And I think I remember that on knight takes e4, I was going to play bishop d3, and then claim I have the center for a pawn. But he didn't either. He played e5, which is, yeah, this looks like a kind of typical fantasy. You know, similar to the main line. I guess I could refresh, show you what I mean. Refresh you guys. D takes e4, f takes e4, e5 is the main line. Knight f3, and it's like this kind of pawn structure is sort of what we're looking at. So it's not too different than this pawn structure, except, you know, these pawns are doubled, and arguably this pawn structure is to white's favor, because I've got his good bishop, traded off for a knight on c3, which normally doesn't do much in the kingside attack. So, yeah, I have lots of potential here. Now, I played knight f3 here. And the reason why is because I thought that on knight takes e4, I would have knight takes... Now, yeah, I think I was calculating lines here. Yeah, so I was calculating a line here in this variation as well, to make sure that he had no other winning tries. So, for example, I was calculating the line knight takes e4, followed by bishop d3, because that's what I said I was going to play. And I thought, does he have queen h4 here? And I thought, oh, this looks so winning for him in my head, right? Because remember, I'm looking at this position here, right? So in my head, I'm thinking, oh, queen h4. But then I'm like, hold on, after g3, knight takes g3, I have bishop f2. Now, it was pointed out to me after the game that the resource knight f3 is just as effective here at dispelling this whole queen h4 idea, right? So what I wanted to, so maybe it's good that I didn't see knight f3 as a defensive resource, because after e5, knight f3, knight takes e4, my idea was to go knight takes e5. But if I go knight takes e5 here, queen h4, I thought that after g3, knight takes g3, bishop f2, queen e4 is strong, which it is. So this can't be played. Now, I do have knight f3 here, but it's possible that either black is, queen e4 is still fine here. So knight takes e5 was my calculation, but it's bad. So I'm like, okay, bishop d3. I didn't see really another move. Knight takes e3, queen d2, e4. Castles, e takes d3, queen takes d3. And here the engine gives white has good compensation for a pawn. I thought I have at least compensation for a pawn, because all his pieces are on the back rank, and I'm ahead after queen d5 for tempo in development. So why is that? Well, it's his move, so he has one tempo. He has no pieces developed, so he has a tempi value of 1. Whereas me, I have castles, that's 1 tempi value. I have d4 pawn, that's a second tempi value. You could argue c6 is a tempo value, but I don't, because it more so impedes his development of his knight. So I have d4, castles, bishop e3, knight f3, and queen c3. So that is a tempo value of 5 to his 1. So I'm ahead 4 tempi for a pawn. So that seemed like a good trade to me. 4 tempi for a pawn. I should have at least compensation, maybe more. So queen d5. And this move looked annoying because if he goes bishop f5, or if I go queen takes d3, he has bishop f5. And, you know, he's getting developed on my payroll. So I didn't like that. So this is how you find like the best move in the position sometimes. You think, what is it that my opponent wants to do? Oh, on queen takes d3, he wants to play bishop f5. So how do I make it so that bishop f5 is a bad move, right? Well, you make bishop f5 a bad move by threatening rook takes f5, right? So that means this knight has to move. Now, where to, right? Well, let me see. There was a very good reason not to play knight e5. I can't quite recall why not. But knight e5, I guess, could run into f6. Maybe here I would even have yeah. And so here he could maybe he maybe wouldn't want to take the knight after rook e1, but it could potentially be best to take the knight here. And maybe it would be best for white to retreat it, maybe to c4. Knight e5 is definitely not the best move though. Okay, so other alternatives, other candidates for the knight. You could move the knight to d2, but it's not active there. You can move the knight to h4, but it's, you know, not doing, it has no prospects. So that brings you to knight g5. And, okay, you shouldn't just play knight g5 blindly, saying it prevents bishop f5. But, for example, a sample calculation was f6, rook ae1, and, well, the knight's pretty immune here, right? You can investigate this line for yourself, but I was calculating this, and this looked very promising. I'm pretty sure black's just getting mated, or will have to give up the queen to stop getting mated. So, knight g5, f6 is ineffective. Okay, what about h6? Well, I'm threatening the f7 pawn, so that's also ineffective. So he played bishop e6, and I played queen takes d3. Now here, he played knight d7, and I played rook a1. Queen takes d3, I kind of glossed over. It's probably an okay move. Maybe not the best move. I'm unsure about it. But it does stop him from castling kingside, which maybe he wants to do. Yeah, and if he plays bishop f5 here, then rook takes, queen takes, rook f1 is strong. Because you're taking on f7 here, so can't do that. So bishop e6, queen takes d3, knight d7. And here the engine starts recommending, not quite yet, I guess after rook a1, castles queenside, the engine starts recommending to convert the initiative. And so this is the flaw in my thinking. I thought I have the initiative, I have the center, let's slow play it. Let's play it slowly, improve the position, but there's nothing left to improve. All my pieces are optimal. Instead, I have to worsen his position, convert my advantage to a structural advantage, right? So the initiative advantage is over, right? He's equalized on development, basically, right? Pretty close. He hasn't equalized on space quite yet, but his pieces are well placed. His position is very solid. I've underestimated how good his position was. And the engine wants me to convert my advantage with knight takes e6, f takes e6, because if queen takes e6, there's like bishop g5, and I guess I'm winning an exchange at least. So f takes e6, and then it recommends playing against the structural weakness with bishop g5. And I think it claims, maybe not bishop g5 here, because there would be queen takes, but, you know, maybe potentially bishop f4. And yeah, just play against the structural weakness on e6 and convert that way. It did not, it occurred to me to play knight takes e6, obviously. But it did not occur to me that it was the best way to play the position, was to convert my advantage this way. And the reason, the flaw in my thinking was, I thought, oh, the knight on g5 is such a good piece. The bishop on e6 is such a stupid piece, right? Stupid light squared bishop. This is my French bias coming in. Not that I'm French. I'm not French. But French defense, right? Because I kind of played the French defense for a little bit when I was a super amateur, not just a regular one. I always think that the light squared bishop is a bad piece. It's terrible. Even if it has nothing blockading it, I'm like, stupid bishop. And I think, great knight, because this knight came from f3, it's the king's knight, right? So it's a great piece. So during the game, I'm thinking, man, this knight's so amazing, it's doing so much, it's attacking f7, it's attacking the bishop, it's attacking h7, it's like amazing. Even though I never want to capture on h7 for obvious reasons. And I'm thinking this bishop is stupid. But the only way to really convert my advantage here and try to win back the pawn with a superior position is to take the bishop. So I started losing the thread. He starts getting a better position. So bishop f4, knight f6, bishop e5, knight g4. I'm not exactly sure where I blundered, but knight f3 gives up the chance to play knight takes e6. So there's a good chance the engine gives knight f3 as the bad move here. Okay, knight f3, knight takes e5, rook takes e5, queen c4. A lot of time when I was calculating queen c4, I was thinking about queen e4. But obviously after queen e4, there would be like bishop d5 here. So queen d2 instead. And black could be better here. I wouldn't surprise me. I believe that's what the engine says too. c3, queen b2, he trades rooks, queen back to d5. He just has a very solid position, f6. And now there's like no chance for me to get a structural advantage here. I'll just speed this along. And now my amazing knight from g5 travels all the way to a2 where it's doing nothing. And this is sort of when it hit me that I should have traded the knight for the bishop because the knight is useless now. The knight's a terrible piece, and the bishop's amazing. So, and I'm just on a pawn. So this is when it occurred to me that, yeah, I screwed up. Okay, so I play on, you play, right? Never resign. Bishop g6, queen b2, queen takes a4, and this is just horrific. Now here I thought I wanted to give my king some luft or get him out of off the back rank because I thought, okay, maybe a queen coming to b1 could be annoying if my queen gets off the back rank, right? Going for perpetual. Now, obviously, we're both in time trouble here. So maybe I am. So I was, of course, thinking about perpetual ideas involving knight c1, right? For example, if he plays queen takes c3 here, the engine already gives queen a6 as a draw, right? So, of course, he just shouldn't take the pawn and should play like something reasonable like queen c2. And he would just be winning there. So my only try here is to play knight c1 and hope that he gets his queen off of a light square. And then I have to find like some super precise perpetual. It's like a 1 in a million shot of me drawing this position. But instead I play the king f2, which is definitely going to lead to a loss. Because he can already play queen c2 here. But after b5, knight c1, he definitely plays queen c2. And with queens coming off the board, there's no hope. So no hope, I resign. So that was my game against Zegalar. Interesting pawn sacrifice, right? I had an interesting pawn sacrifice, but the issue was my inability to understand how to play the position, and so that's just going to come with experience. And yeah, I could improve my theory this game, but my theory is not the reason I lost. I mean, I could improve my theory to improve my winning chances in the future, right? but it was more about recognizing the merits of my position, the merits of his position, why his position is good, why my position is good, and how to play against his weaknesses. So, yeah. The second last game is against Roy Yearwood. So I was playing with the black pieces against the National Master, and he plays d4, and I'm like, okay, sweet, d5. Like, are you gonna play Queen's Gambit? He plays London. I'm like, okay, sweet. London is probably the opening with d4 that I'm least afraid of. Maybe aside from the Collie. But the Collie has some setup that's like rarely seen with like e3, b3, c4, right? And the dark square bishop being fianchettoed. And I'm not super familiar with the Collie just because it's less popular than the London, so I face it less. But I'm like super familiar with the London. It's probably my best opening against d4. But I think the Collie is worse, so I could perform better against it. It's all moot because it's the same pawn structure, just with the difference being where the dark squared bishop is. So, knight f6. I could play c5 here, but I don't because white is e4. And this is too complicated. No reverse Albin counter gambit up a tempo for you. Knight f6 first. And e4, if you're a London player, I would recommend against c5 looking into e4. I would definitely recommend that. So knight f6 first, e3, c5, c3, and I simplify. And people are like, oh, you're simplifying too early. Releasing the tension, blah blah blah. Well, I don't really want to have to deal with this dc5 b4 stuff, and really what I want is a clean Carlsbad structure. Clean fight. You have your pawns, I have my pawns. I'm going to get my bishop outside the pawn chain. I'm going to be happy. I know this position. And you're going to be happy because you know this position, presumably. There's always been like some queen b6 stuff, or knight c6 followed by queen b6. But those lines tend to be complicated and hard for me to understand. So I'm just like, let's play simple and easy to understand. And then hopefully I'll play my opponent. So knight c6, bishop d3, and a6. a6, mysterious, maybe it's a mysterious move. Okay, I mean, bishop b5 is obviously possible here, but maybe bishop d7 is a good response because, I haven't wasted a tempo developing my bishop yet. So bishop d3, a6. And the idea behind a6 is after knight d2, bishop g4, queen b3 is probably actually a good move, but I have a super solid response to it, right? I also don't want to be facing queen a4, bishop b5 pinning ideas, especially after I close off my bishop with e6. Those tend to be very annoying to face. So the idea is after queen b3, if someone were to play queen b3, I would play knight a5. And now they could play queen a4, and well, this only serves to energize my minority attack with b5. And if bishop takes b5, a takes b5, there's no sacrifice here, is my point, because after queen takes b5, there's queen d7. And the knight is protected, everything is fine. So, yeah, queen b3 after queen a4, but the engine actually says, yeah, no, you're fine after queen c2. It kind of argues that the knight's somewhat misplaced, although I don't think it is, but I guess it's committed it's like too committal for the engine to like it. So, anyways, that's just the reason why I play a6, knight d2, bishop g4, and it's funny because in a post-mortem analysis of a London, we were just discussing the London, and I'm just like, okay, this is my setup against the London. This is what I play every time. I tell everyone this. This is every time I have a London position, I probably have this on the board unless they play knight c3, which is the Jabava London, which is completely different, right? If they play reasonable moves, this is very likely to happen. And Roy is saying in this London discussion, oh, why would my opponents blunder with knight gf3? Knight e2 is clearly superior, and all of this random bullshit that's flying out of his mouth, right? Or f3 is clearly superior, something stupid. And then it's time for him to put his money where his mouth is. He plays knight gf3, and I thought this was super weird because Roy's always trying to get you out of book with some weird sideline, right, or something that you don't expect. But I mean, I know this position like as well as anybody, right? I've seen this probably 1,000 times. I can even check in my player database. If I go to my super secret account, how many times have I had this exact position as black? 7 times? No, I have to have it more than 7 times. No, it's going to take a while for it to find all the games. But I score well here, 57% over. Okay, now 10 games. You know, it's gonna fluctuate a little bit. It's only 10 games, really? Okay, that's super weird. I thought I've had this position like a lot more times. Really? Only 10 games? No, that's not possible. It has to be like some sort of like time setting or something. Yeah. Since when? Since like, I don't know, 2020? 26 games in the London system? I find that unlikely. Okay, I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. I could have sworn that I mean, it's only the least recent game is October 2022. So there has to be some glitch in the way Leeches is getting my games. Anyways, I've seen this position a bunch of times. Maybe it's more often on chess.com, who knows. Okay. So he plays the most like stereotypical line. This is what a London player would play. So e6, h3, bishop h5. Yeah, h3 is not really doing much. In fact, you could argue the white's even better off without h3, but okay. Bishop h5, castles. Bishop d6. Bishop g5 is very common. Bishop takes e6 is the computer's choice, but bishop g5 makes a ton of sense. Now, castles make sense here. If he were to... Now, he played queen b1 here, which I think is a great choice. If he plays queen c2, I would have played queen c7. No, I would have played bishop g6, followed by queen c7. So say something reasonable like rook f1, I would play queen c7 here. And I guess he could play knight e5 already. No, he can't. But like some people might say, oh, you know, like your position sucks, bishop takes f6. I could even play bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, g takes f6. And I actually really like this pawn structure for black. You're going to play king h8, rook g8. And it kind of feels even like a sort of Sicilian, you know, like the Najdorf-Rauser gf6 pawn structure. It's just very intuitive to play. You just double rooks on the g file and you make sure that you don't give them a free outpost. So, yeah, that's something that I could have played. But queen b1, now queen c7 makes a lot less sense. I mean, it's going to probably be played later, but... for example, he's threatening the h7 pawn, so bishop g6, rook e1. And queen c7 is kind of the automatic move here. But on queen c7, I wasn't really scared of bishop takes f6, nor was I scared of knight e5, because neither are really playable. I was scared of c4 here. And people were asking me, like, why are you scared of c4, Nick? And I said, well, you know, it looks like it's going to be a good IQP here. For example, like, it's hard for me to play knight takes d5. If he plays c takes d5, because he always has bishop takes f6 as an intermezzo. I can play bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, but then on dc4, right, this knight's always going to be attacking this bishop. It might have to move back. Maybe this IQP actually isn't that bad when I take a good look at it. You know, I could have a rook coming to the d file, but all things considered, I thought c4 was a strong move. And, okay, I'm thinking, okay, how do I prevent c4? Well, I thought, okay, I'd play b5. But b5, knight e5... And he's going to be playing f4 next move. And I know that this is what gets him hard. This is what he wants. He wants knight e5 followed by f4. And I can't allow that. Now maybe I could play bishop takes no, I can't play bishop takes e5 because then the knight would be pinned. So, yeah. Definitely can't play b5 here. So I found a solution. Played bishop e7. Now... If knight e5, well, just knight takes e5. And then on rook takes e5, I have knight d7. So there's no knight e5, and there's no c4 either, because, well, the d4 pawn would be hanging. So I'm like, bishop e7, great. Bishop f4, bishop d6 with an implied draw offer, right? You know, if he plays bishop g5, I would probably go back to e7. Maybe I would consider another move, but, you know, I'd be fine repeating, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, he played knight e5, taking that off the table, which I was fine with. I thought, yeah, this is good for him. Took on d3. I checked this with the engine. The engine said all along the way my position was roughly equal. Bishop takes d3 isn't a bad move. It was at this moment where I thought knight takes g6 could be a problem, and the ruined pawn structure could cause me problems. Maybe there would be some sacrificial ideas on g6. So, best to simplify here with bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, and queen c7 now. And he wants to play f4, right? And I was feeling happy because if he could play f4 here, he would be very happy, right? But he can't. because his bishop's there. So he has to move his bishop. So I was thinking, yeah, if he really wants to play f4, the solution is bishop h2. Because on bishop g3, I would have the intermezzo knight h5. And this is what led me to think about knight h5 against bishop h2, which I'm going to come back to. I mean, he can play knight gf3 here, but then he's not playing f4 anytime soon anyways. And then even here, there's knight e4 followed by f5, so he's not getting what he wants. So bishop h2. And so here, I'm just thinking about how I can stop him from doing what he wants. Because as long as he can't do what he wants, I'm happy. So, he wants to play f4. I know this. I could play bishop takes e5, right? But then after bishop takes, knight takes, and then, so like for example, bishop takes, knight takes, rook takes, knight d7. He sort of has what he wants here. He can even consider like rook h5 maybe. Maybe there's just knight f6 back. I'm not exactly sure. But the thing is, this looks fine for him. Even if he doesn't get to play f4. So that's one way to prevent him from playing f4, snapping on e5. But I don't want to do that. It just didn't look appealing to me. So I had to prevent him from playing f4. Well, I need a piece to cover f4, and that has to be the knight. So knight h5. And, I calculated some sample lines like g4. Well, g4 I have f6, so gh5 I have fe5, and, well, you've just ruined your king side. Right? So you can attack the knight with the queen, which he did. Queen f3 is what I was calculating. But he played queen e2. And the only other alternative here is f4. So, yeah, I'll digress with f4. So, f4, the move was f takes e5. And so here, if knight takes c6, I have bishop takes f4. He can run with the knight, but then I play bishop takes h2. And then on bishop takes f4, knight takes f4, e6 is defended, the queen is attacked, so it has to move. And after it does, I can simply recapture my knight. And concretely here, I guess g3 would run into knight takes h3, which is check. So, anyways, black's probably fine here. So that was the plan against f4. So that's why I thought I was preventing f4, it's just I'll play f6. And if f6, if he goes back, then I'll just capture the f4 pawn. So, and yeah, it would be a trade for the e6 pawn, of course, right? You can't get something for nothing. Rook takes e6 here. I thought this position would be fine too. Because, well, I guess here I'm already forking him, so better watch out. So, queen e2, probably a critical try, which he played. f6. And I didn't realize that I was sacrificing a pawn. I was just trying to counter his idea. And so, this is a common occurrence for me. I'm like, oh, I'm sacrificing a pawn. I guess, I have the initiative. I have, you have to be optimistic about it. So, the engine actually agrees with this pawn sacrifice if I follow it up correctly, which conveniently I did. So, bishop takes e5 is probably playable, but knight takes e5. I want to play bishop c5 after d5, which happened. Okay. So here, the engine just says I have full compensation for a pawn. Knight f3 is the reasonable try to stop me from playing rook takes f2. And I was thinking I would play rook f5 here, but then when I got to the position, I'm like, oh, rook f5 just plays queen g4, and then, the queen is not really being contained there, right? Because the queen, when I double up on the f-file, the queen can just go to c4, for example. No, it would be hanging there. The bishop takes f2, so queen can go to a4. It doesn't matter where the queen goes. The queen isn't on the king side anymore, right? What's very interesting about this game also that I forgot to mention yet is that Roy chose to play heavily on the king side, right? So I could have chosen to play on the queen side many times, but then he would have played on the king side, and I would have gone attacked on the king side. So choosing to contest him on the king side, I feel, was the right decision. So I can't really describe to you guys how I came across this move. I sort of just it just came to me when I was thinking about rook f5. I'm like, well, I play rook f4. Now the queen's kind of being contained here, right? Queen g5, I'm just going to double up on the f-file. So, and one of the ideas behind f4 is that, behind him playing f4 is that if I take on e5, he'll take back with the f-file and have the open f-file. So I was kind of feeling confident here that, well, now I have the semi-open f-file, so now you kind of have to play against your own idea. So rook f4, intending to double, but also containing the queen. And it's interesting that when I checked this with the engine said rook f4 was the only move that maintained equality. So it's not that I'm some sort of genius, I just got lucky. And this happens all the time in my games. Sometimes I have a good intuition for what I want to do. So rook e2, rook a f8, rook f1. And my calculation here was that I was going to play rook 8 f5, but he has queen e8. And so I'm racking my brain trying to find some way to stop queen e8. For example, I could play queen e7, but then queen g5 is very simple. And how am I going to stop a queen trade here? I mean, I could play queen e8, but then queen g3, and that didn't look appealing to me. So I thought, okay, g6, but then queen g5 all the same, and queen's going to g3, h6, but then queen g6, right? All of these moves fail to one specific move. And bishop e7, you might be asking yourself, well, isn't there knight g5 here? Well, against bishop e7, knight g5, my queen's no longer defending the h7 pawn, so I don't have the defensive resource g6, so I'd be forced to take the knight here. So bishop e7, intending to do something, I guess. I don't even know what bishop e7 would be threatening. Maybe bring this rook to f5. Anyways, that also doesn't work. Also, he's playing with extreme caution here, making sure I can never take on f2. So, for example, actually one of the sample lines that I might talk about is knight g5. Of course, I calculated this move, right? You have to calculate knight g5 here. And I was going to play g6. So now my queen's defending h7. So, okay, now what do you calculate? Well, if the queen moves to h6, you're fine. So you calculate knight takes e6 here. And then, I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. I haven't checked it with the engine. I will after this analysis. But I'm pretty sure rook takes f2 pretty much just wins on the spot here. Because if you take the queen, I can take the rook with check and then take your queen. And if queen h6, I have, like, rook f1 is double check, so it has to be analyzed. But I guess just king h2. There's even bishop g1 there, king g3. That doesn't look like it's working, though. There has to be a good move here. It could be as simple as rook takes e2, king h1, followed by queen f7. But then I guess the c5 bishop would fall, but I'd be getting an exchange there, right? So if he takes on c5 here, I would capture back, and if he plays king h1, queen f7, knight takes e5, I win an exchange. So I'm pretty sure on knight g5 here, g6, knight takes e6, I have rook takes f2. I mean, I'm not that good at calculating the critical lines in these types of positions. I'm just good at coming up with the complicated moves, and I just let my opponent find the what they want to play, and then I'm like, well, I mean, I had a response prepared. Let's see if it works. So we'll see if I'm vindicated by the engine. But rook f1 with extreme caution. So I play rook 8 f7 here. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna play slowly and see if I can somehow stop you from playing queen e8 check, and then maybe I'll play rook f5 in the future. And I'm gonna label this move a mistake. Could even be classified as a blunder. Knight g5. He didn't see his queen was getting trapped, which to me is kind of insane because I think Roy's a good player. So it's kind of nice to have these moments where you see a good player make a mistake, because it kind of makes you relate to them in a more human way. Because just g6, and after queen h6, knight bishop f8, and I get his queen, and I was feeling really confident here that he had no chance, zero chance whatsoever. Game over. You can play on, Roy. I know you're gonna play on, but you have nothing here. You're sacking your queen. On knight takes e6, he's just on a piece after I take his queen. So I'm like, game over. You had to sack your queen. Good luck. But of course he's not going to resign because, well, you can't lose to me, right? Well, knight g4 and rook e4. And this move is even worse than his move. It's a blunder. Terrible. Giving back the game completely. Best move here is probably queen c4. Attacking the rook, attacking the a2 pawn. But rook e4, I missed the move knight f6, which is equalizing. I can't take his rook because of knight e8 check. So queen c4 is practically forced. And then rook takes e4, d takes e4, and his rook comes to the open d file. And this is just brutal. It's like terrible. So I play g5, rook d7, and actually I was in time trouble here, so I was super scared to play king g6 because I saw some sort of mating net. I wanted to play king f5, this was my whole idea, but after g4, I was convinced somehow I was getting mated. You know, maybe if the rook were to come to f6 in the future. right? Like if I get greedy here, you can imagine knight to h5. And I mean, okay, h6 obviously is a self-mate. But if I play, say, queen takes b2, maybe there would be rook g7 followed by rook f7. And then, okay, rook f6 is next. So king g6, rook f6, and it's mate, right? So I thought there was some sort of mate that was happening there. And I'm like, oh, I can't go king g6 because of g4, which is like... And I think the way to escape here as black would be to get counterplay against the e5 pawn, because he has to play one move that's not check, and the moment he does, you can take on e5. So I think probably queen b5, defending the b7 pawn, making knight h5 not possible, and threatening queen takes e5. And I think the engine gives equality here, probably after like knight takes h7, queen takes e5, rook takes b7, something like this. I don't know. Maybe this is a better practical try. But at the last moment, I didn't trust my gut, which I probably should have. King g6 is probably giving me better winning chances, because g4 is kind of a hard positional idea to see anyways. He probably would have played it, though. King f8, and now he has a sure perpetual, and we played on, because now he can play for the win. But the engine gives zeros throughout this endgame analysis. It says he never actually has a winning chance. It's important here to play queen takes c3, so he doesn't have knight c7. Knight g7, and then he let me push my queen d2, maybe pinning the g4 pawn. But you know, even here there's a way out for black here, for white here. Probably just rook f3, and I guess here I can take on e5, but my winning chances aren't much higher. Queen c1, g4, a5. King g3, a4, and okay, he has to take a perpetual here because if I get to play a3, I'm winning, and I have to take a perpetual here because if I don't, say if I played after knight f5, a3, he'd play e6, king e8 practically forced, then knight g, then e7, and I'm not in time here, right? He's going to queen first, so had to take a draw there, even though I was completely winning. I should have just played queen c4 instead of rook e4, which was a blunder. Which brings me to my last game and my best game against Rex, which is a very funny game. This is probably the most fun I've ever had in a while. Really, it's games like this that keep me coming back to chess and make it really hard for me to stop playing. Is games like this where you play against a strong player and you know they're asking themselves in their head after they lost, like, how did I lose to that idiot? How did I lose to that imbecile? How did he get me? That feeling is always just super terrific when you know that they think that you don't know anything. And so Rex is a good chess player. Just gonna throw it out there, especially in faster time controls. He's like super strong at fast time controls, which is surprising because I flagged him this game. He lost on time, not even on position, although his position was pretty weak. The funny thing is, last time I beat him, which was actually the first time we played ever, which was in a classical game. Let me know if you want to see that game. He said, "You're never gonna beat me again," and so far I haven't until yesterday. So that's one of the other reasons why this was super fun. So I played e4, and he comes half an hour late. He has 56 minutes on his clock. He walks in, fills out his score sheet with my name and his name, plays e5, and then loudly says, with like a rolled R, like, draw. And he hasn't pressed his clock yet, so I motion to him, push your clock. He does, and then f4. And so the thing is, I didn't even hesitate to think about this, right? Because you gotta play with confidence. And one thing I've learned about the King's Gambit, as a King's Gambit player, you can't chicken out. Either you play the King's Gambit, or you learn something else entirely. You have to commit to it 100%, because if at one time I would, so like when I started playing the King's Gambit, I'm like, oh, maybe if I face stronger players, I'll have to play something more solid because they're gonna know how to play against the King's Gambit. That is false. That is a myth you make up in your head. Stronger players know nothing about the King's Gambit. They fear the King's Gambit. Um, so many players. So like one of the players at the club that's a national master, Anand, he said, "Man, I really don't like playing your King's Gambit, Nick. Even though in like slow blitz 5+3 time control, he plays the main lines of like of the accepted King's Gambit, which to me is just insane that he can figure those out over the board in blitz time control. So he could totally play against it in classical time control, but he doesn't know the theory, so he's kind of afraid of it. And so this is why you play the King's Gambit. You want to make the guy afraid. And so after he offered the draw, I played f4 and pressed the clock, and Roy's on the board right next to me. And he's looking at me like I'm crazy. He's like, "What are you doing, playing f4 when Rex offered you an easy draw, like on move 1? You could draw and get out of here and have your lunch." But it's the mentality that no, I will play the King's Gambit against anything. I will see. It's like I see the move e5 on the board, and already before they even press their clock, the pawn is materializing itself on f4. There's like not even any questions asked. If I get this position on the board, that pawn is coming to f4 without a second thought, right? There's no chickening out, and them offering me a draw is the same thing as me thinking if I'm going to play knight f3 here. No, it's no draw, no knight f3, no knight c3, no bishop c4, f4, King's Gambit, and it's an underrated opening. I've had like a little bit of a dip in my enthusiasm for it recently because, there were some lines that were giving me a lot of trouble, but then once I resolved those lines, the King's Gambit's not a good opening, but it's pretty okay, pretty up there. It's not as bad as people think, so, and that's the main strength of it. So he plays what's known as a shallop defense, e5, knight h5, bishop e2. This is the extent of my theory knowledge. And the thing about the shallop defense is here you just got to play with your intuition. Right, there's so many moves available to both sides. Learning the theory here is kind of useless. There's no real engine best line. You'll see masters play all sorts of things here, right? Like here, d6, g5, g6, d5. Interestingly, g5 here, knight takes g5 is premature because after queen takes g5, there's pressure on the g2 pawn, so you don't have time for this. You're just going to get a worse ending after queen f3. I guess you can't play bishop f3 for obvious reasons that I don't see. If you play bishop f3, I guess they can just move the queen and be up a pawn? I don't know. Anyways, knight takes g5 is premature, so interestingly g5 is even playable here. d5 also playable, d6 is playable. He played d6, which I guess is kind of considered the main line. It should be noted that d4 is a blunder here, in view of captures, and if knight captures, queen h4, king d2. My book gives this as a disaster. Thank you, John Shaw, for vindicating me. It gives just knight f6 here, and I mean knight e4 is kind of annoying, and black's just better here, so can't allow that. So d4 was the first move that came to my mind though, and then once I realized, oh, he's gonna play queen h4 check, I'm like, okay, I should castle. So I castled, d5, knight e5, and yeah, I mean, before I castled, I had to calculate, of course, queen d4 check here, so let's go through the analysis. King h1, takes, and I mean, white, I think, is probably better here, because, there's d4 being threatened with the threat of bishop takes f4, opening the f-file, I guess bishop e6, d4, queen a5 is a game. Rook e1 was played, but bishop f4 already looks playable to me. Okay, knight takes e5. He played the other move that I didn't know was a move, bishop c5. And now I start tanking, even though... Whoops. So I started tanking here, even though I could have easily played king h1 and ruled out any other option, right? Like, you can easily rule out d4 here, because it's not as if it's going to give you any opportunity to block with bishop e3. You can easily rule out rook f2 here, because queen h4 looks strong. So I probably could have just snap played king g1. But I started calculating because, well, if king h1's losing, then I just declined to draw and just got crushed, right? And I didn't realize king h1 could be losing the bishop c5 check until I realized he could potentially play knight g3. And so I'm sitting at the board calculating. Let me check how much time I spent on this move. I spent 11 minutes on king h1. And this was pretty much when the tension was at its highest. Because, you know, he's getting his pieces developed and he has some opportunity to cause me problems. And I had this idea that, okay, he's attacking me. And usually when I'm attacking, I look for moves from my side of the position. And now I'm trying to defend. And it's I have to make sure he has no attacking resources. So I stood up, went around for like 3 minutes and looked at it from his perspective, from the other side of the board. And I couldn't find anything new. And while I'm standing, he comes up to me and he's like, "It's a draw, just take a draw." Which was super funny because it's kind of an informal draw offer. I learned recently you have to offer a draw right before the end of your turn in order for it to be considered like a legitimate draw offer. So he kind of gives me an informal draw offer, and like Roy's also like looking at me like, "Oh, you know, what is this that you're talking about the game?" I didn't say anything, but Rex was saying stuff. And so I walked back around, confident in my calculation, play king h1. Now, what was my calculation? This is important. For example, knight g3 is not a winning move. I'm pretty sure the engine would give this as good for white. It's not even discussed in the book by John Shaw, so it's likely just dubious. But you have to make sure it's not winning. So hg3, fg3. You have a tempo here, you got to play knight f3. There's no real other way to stop queen h4 check. So knight f3. Against queen d6, you play d4. Now the bishop covers the h6 square. There's no queen h6. And against queen d5, threatening queen h5, you play d4, queen h5, king g1, knight guards h2. Now there was a post-mortem analysis with bishop g4, suggested by Dale Hazel, and it looked kind of hard. It felt kind of hard to defend when I was trying to defend it. But you know, I'll analyze it with the engine and put it in the study, see what happens. I think we were looking at queen e1. I think we felt that rook e1 was stronger. Because I guess after bishop takes f3, there is bishop e5 double check, but even bishop takes f3 is check here. And I guess, you know, after bishop e7, you could play like bishop. Well, I guess bishop e7 kind of goes against the spirit because you want to play queen h4 and mate me. So if king f8, I guess you could play bishop g4 here, and you know, queen h4, there's bishop h3. So yeah, I'm pretty sure bishop g4 would be dubious, but you know, I'll check the calculation and get back to the to it. Okay, so knight g3 pretty much is not winning. And so he thought for some time and played knight f6. And knight d3 is the only move in this database. Knight d3 doesn't look too good to me. c3 makes more sense. You want to play d4. Bishop d6. Everyone was like, d4 here is obviously good for white, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, I checked it with the book by John Shaw, and John Shaw said, well, the endgame's actually very close to equal, although white is better. Likely outcome is a draw. That's the fair outcome. So I'm satisfied with my move. And actually, I played a move that's not discussed in the book. So to my knowledge, this move has never been played before, which is super exciting as a King's Gambit player. I mean, it probably has been played before sometime by someone. But, you know, this is the first time I've ever seen this move, knight c4. So to my knowledge, this is a novelty, new move. So he castled, and I played d4. Now I want to capture the f4 pawn. And you always have to consider g5. But g5, I would probably continue with simple development and not try to capitalize on the kingside weakness right away. Just slow play it and eventually capitalize on the kingside weakness. Okay, so here knight d5. So he's guarding the f4 pawn. This is the move I thought was very practical. Play knight bd2. So I had to make sure when I play knight bd2 that knight e3 wasn't winning. Now it's not winning here, but you might ask after b5, is it winning? And the answer is no, because bishop f3. And, you know, after c6, I can start by taking your bishop. And if you take my knight, I take your knight. And I guess c6, and this isn't really playable. So, b5, not really working. He plays bishop e7. I thought for like half a second, hey, maybe I should have taken this bishop, but I'm like, nah, it's kind of passive. I have no regrets. So, bishop d3. Now, I kind of had a hidden threat here to play. Should we play b5 here? I was going to consider seriously knight e5. with an exchange sacrifice after knight e3. I knew I had a draw in hand here, but it was unclear to me in my head if I was really going to capitalize more. For example, queen h5, g6. I had planned to play knight takes g6, f takes g6, bishop takes g6, h takes g6, queen takes g6 with at least a perpetual check. I guess I'd have to play queen h6 for perpetual. So queen h6 with perpetual. And yeah, the bishops guard the h-file, so it's kind of hard to play for more here, more than a perpetual. So I probably would have to take a perpetual here. And additionally, I saw during the game that he could also consider, at this point, after queen h5, he could consider f5. So, I mean, I could consider bishop takes b5 followed by bishop c4 here. But, yeah, bishop takes b5, and if you take the rook, bishop c4, it looks kind of good for white. Knight g6 is mate. But he stopped all of this shenanigans altogether with f5, and I'm like, okay. But should he have wanted to take a draw, he probably should have played b5. So maybe he missed b5, he didn't think about it, but he was sort of just playing intuitively against my attacking motifs, right? The bishop's on the long diagonal, so let's blockade it. And f5, yeah, it really stops a lot of my attack. So knight f3, I'm trying to get to the e5 square with a knight. Knight d7, queen b3, king h8. My threat here is to take on f4, so if he plays some stupid move, I can take the f4 pawn. And if he takes my bishop, I can bring my c knight to e5 with a discovered attack on the king. And there's no good block. Oh, I guess, is there knight d5 here? Huh. Looks like there is. Huh. Maybe my threat wasn't a threat if he has knight d5 here. Interesting. Then what was my threat? I guess knight c5 followed by bishop takes f4? I don't know. Bishop takes f4, knight takes f4. I totally thought that knight c5 was my threat. But I guess with the pawn on c6, you can just go back. Yeah, I don't see a really good solution here. So now that I see the position on the board, knight d5 looks obvious. I mean, I could consider c4, and then, I don't know, I guess the knight could move again, but doesn't look like there's anything here. Yeah, because it's not double check, he can just block. I feel kind of stupid. My whole idea was to play knight f7 here on king h8. And like bishop c4, he can just reinforce his knight. So maybe bishop takes f4 wasn't a threat. I thought it was. It looked like a threat. And my opponent agreed. So he played king h8. So I'll check with the engine. Maybe I had a threat there. Maybe I didn't. I thought I was threatening bishop takes f4, but I guess, I don't know. Maybe he should let me play bishop takes f4 and go down a piece for nothing. Okay, bishop d2 now. Now I want to get my pieces active. c6, rook a1, knight 7 b6, knight c e5. I don't want to trade the knights. Bishop f6. Now we're getting pretty low on time. c4, knight e3. So instead of defending a passive position, he decides to just give the pawn back. But now I have some activity. g6, queen c2, a5. Mysterious move. If the pawn gets to a3, I can just respond with b3, and there's no issue. So queen f2, king g7. All-purpose move. Rook f e1. I'm just getting my rook to a better square. And then maybe I'll consider attacking the king side. I mean, my pieces are all like really actively aimed at his king side, and my king's really safe. So a4. I wanted to play queen g3 here, but queen g3 runs into g5, and I wasn't so sure about provoking that quite yet. So I played. Then I had an epiphany. Oh, I'll play h4 and then queen g3. So he played rook a5 here, and then I didn't think about rook a5. I played just queen g3, and then right after I played, I'm like, oh, this loses to f4. Because the rook is now hitting the knight. If I take the pawn, he has a discovery on my queen. And I can't play queen takes e5 because the rook is defending it. Right? So I didn't think about how my opponent's last move impacted my plan to play queen g3. So I'm pretty sure f4 just wins on the spot. Although we'll see what the engine says. But I'm like 90% sure it looks pretty winning. Okay, knight a8 was his plan apparently. To go knight c7, knight e6. Very, very extravagant positional plan. I play c5. So there's no way that f4 is winning now, because now if the bishop takes e5, I can take it with my queen. after f4. Now, was there another way to prevent this? Well, I could have played rook 3e2, and then on f4 just move the queen. So that's also an alternative. I could have also just moved my queen to h2. All of these alternatives seem like more practical than c5, because c5 gives away the d5 square, so it's a really ugly move to make. But the rook's cut off now, so that was my justification. So he played knight c7, and then I can come to d5, or so maybe I want to play queen f4 when I was knight d5, so that's annoying. So I played h5, g5, h6. And there is some analysis here. For example, I played h6 intuitively. I didn't do any calculation. But say if he plays king takes h6, I don't give any checks. All I would have to do here, I guess, what was the analysis in the postmortem? I believe it was, or it could have been just, I think it was queen h3 followed by bishop takes f5, but on queen h3 there's king g6. Let me see if I can remember. Is it like knight f7? Rook f7? No, that can't be it. Oh, knight c4. Knight c4. Hitting the rook. Okay. So the rook could move, and then there would follow maybe some. I guess so. Let's say the rook moves back to a8 or maybe b5. I think we looked at rook b5, knight d6, rook takes b7 is too greedy because of knight takes f5, bishop takes f5, bishop takes f5, and queen h3, queen h7 is strong. So you probably don't want to play rook b5. So if the rook goes back to a8, I guess it would just be knight d6 with the same threat. And on f4, I always have queen h2. So there's no fork. So yeah, taking on h6 is not recommended by me. Although I didn't see knight c4, I probably could have played it. I guess there's some further analysis to be done regarding bishop takes d4 on account of something. So if knight takes d4, queen takes d4, I don't know if I have anything there. But I guess here you could try already queen h2. And I guess on king g7 there's rook e7, so they would want to go king g6, and I guess you could go rook e7 similarly here. A lot of the lines look really scary, and so in a practical game, taking on h6 is very scary. So king h8, I think, is the better practical try, and then I played queen h2, so there's no f4. He played f4 all the same. Rook 3e2, and I thought he would go bishop d7 here, because my plan is to go queen h5. So if he goes queen h5, he has bishop e8, and now I'm not playing my plan. I could play queen g4 here, but I most likely just wouldn't play queen h5. I would play, I don't know, search for something else, maybe knight c4, similar to what we just looked at. But bishop e6 allowed me to play queen h5, so on bishop f7 I have knight takes f7. And actually, I have a threat here of bishop takes h7. So bishop takes a2 is obviously stupid, because bishop takes h7, king takes h7, queen g6, king h8, and knight takes g5 is strong. There's no bishop g5 because of queen g7 mate, knight f7's threat. And then rook e8 once the e-file opens up. It's not happening. So he found the way to defend the. He realized, bishop takes h7 is a threat, right? Because he's an attacking player too, right? We both like to attack, so we both, see these sacrificial ideas pretty quickly. So he's like, he wants to sack on h7. Okay, so he plays bishop g8, and then I instantly play knight h. Right, keep in mind, I'm seeing right. Actually, it's really interesting because when he beat me in a classical game last time, he told me the moves you see I saw before, and I already predicted them, and something stupid, like some sort of random thing that implies he's a better player. But in this time scramble, it was actually me who could see what was happening first, right? I was thinking on his time and predicting what he was going to play, and I was responding instantly, basically for the last 4 moves, right? I was like, okay, after I played c5, knight c7, I pretty much played h5 instantly. He played g5 instantly, h6 instantly, king h8 relatively quickly, queen h2. He took a while to play f4. Took a while to play bishop e6. Took a while to play bishop g8. And then on knight h2 he flagged. And how could the game have continued? Well, we can look at a lot of things here. For example, it could be knight d5, knight e6. I guess no bishop move. Rook a8. Lots of things could be played. But let's look at maybe even like bishop takes knight. But that would weaken the g7 square. So let's just say queen takes d4. This was analyzed pretty heavily in the postmortem when I was looking at it with the stronger players. And I'm like, yeah, knight hg4 probably. And so here, I believe we analyzed rook takes c5. And again, there's lots of moves that can potentially be played. Like knight d5, knight e6, queen takes c5, I guess. But we looked at mainly rook takes c5. And, okay, my automatic response here was knight takes f6, rook takes f6, queen takes g5. And knight e8 looks forced to defend the rook and the g7 square. And then it looked like white was getting strong play after the move. Which move was it? Knight f7 check? No, not knight f7 check yet. White was getting strong play with rook e4. At least I thought so. We looked at another line where there was some simplification, some like queen trade. It's not quite occurring to me right yet. It could have been just knight f3. So if you take the bishop, I can take the... No, I can't take the rook. No, it can't be knight f3, because they just take the bishop. Oh, no, but knight... hold on, knight f3. If they take the bishop, takes on e8, then just take the queen. So I don't think that's the line. No, it's not the line. There was another line that wasn't rook e4 that was analyzed. It could be one where they take the knight somehow. Yeah, post-mortem analysis is hard to remember. Let me see. Oh yeah, knight f. Well, yeah, I guess if knight f3, if they take on d3, you have queen takes g8. Yeah, that's what it is. No, but on king takes rook takes e8, there's rook f8, right? So I don't know if I believe that. Or it could have been, I guess it could have been just knight f7 here, right? So if bishop takes, there's rook takes. Yeah, it was knight f7. So if bishop takes f7, there's rook takes e8. So rook takes f7 is relatively forced. And then we looked at, I believe, rook takes e8, rook takes g5, or was it? Can't be queen takes g8 here, right? Because rook takes e8, there's rook takes g5. Maybe it wasn't knight f7 here yet. I know there was another line we looked at that wasn't rook e4 that went into an ending that we thought was good for white. But it's kind of hard to recall, and maybe it was just dubious. Wait, hold on. Knight f3, rook takes f7. Yeah, but rook takes e8 is not check, so... yeah. Regardless, rook e4. You might ask, what about queen takes d3? Well, you don't play knight takes d3. You play knight f7 here. And one of the differences between that and the lines we were looking at was that you just don't know bishop takes f7 because rook takes e8 would be check. So rook takes f7 here. There is queen takes c5. And I thought this was quite strong for white. Because you still can't move the knight. I guess you could. But like, yeah, there's like f3, I guess, is a try. but they could follow, I guess, rook takes e8 for starters, f takes g2, and just king to h2. And yeah, this check's not going to do anything, and there's no real other checks. So I thought that, yeah, they shouldn't take the bishop. Keep in mind, this is like more than 5 moves after the game ended, right? So there's lots of moves possible here. They could also consider queen d6 here. And knight f7 check could be very similar here. Knight f7, rook takes f7, followed by rook takes e8 potentially. Although there would be the rook takes g5 there. So in any likely case, it was something else. Actually, I thought we found an instant win here. Was it knight f7, rook f7, queen takes g8? No, can't be that. Let me turn on the engine, because I'm pretty sure we found an instant win here. Bishop c4. Or rook takes f4. I think if we found anything, it would have been bishop c4. Yeah. And I guess they can't move the bishop because there would be knight f7. Anyways, there's good reason to think white has good potential for an attack here, because the king's really unsafe. So I'll end my analysis there. A lot of the analysis is very hard and tactical and hard to keep track of. But that was one of my best wins because, you know, it's a great King's Gambit game. The guy offered me a draw multiple times and I declined both. And, you know, I hope you enjoyed this analysis. I got a bit shaky towards the end there because it's hard to remember the post-mortem stuff. But the lines are very hard to keep track of, and it's a very hard position to understand. I hope you agree. Anyways, let me know what you think about this long analysis, and let me know if you want to see in my future games. I'll see you guys later.